Hey guys, you may or may not know that I'm doing a giveaway for when I hit 800 subscribers the other day. That giveaway, I'll have a link to that in the description down below, but basically I'm giving away a Raspberry Pi kit. So the giveaway is going to have, of course, a Raspberry Pi, a case, a power supply, a 32 gig micro SD card, and basically everything you're going to need to get going. And I figured, since I'm doing this Raspberry Pi giveaway, I should probably do some Raspberry Pi content. So in this video, we're going to learn how to make a RetroPie. So if you're not familiar with what a RetroPie is, basically it's a Raspberry Pi that you put an operating system on that lets you emulate all kinds of old school gaming systems like Nintendo and Super Nintendo and N64 and Mega Drive and Sega and Game Boy, and there's a huge list of the things that you can emulate and basically play all those games that you grew up with if you're like me and grew up in the 80s. So today we're going to take a look at how to do that, and so let's just go ahead and jump in, and we'll start with the hardware first. So of course you're going to need a Raspberry Pi. The case that I've got on here is optional, but I do recommend getting a case for it to help keep it protected and keep the elements off of it, and just to keep things from possibly going wrong, shorting out, whatever. You're also going to need some kind of a micro USB cable, basically to run for power. You're going to need a power supply to go with this. You can power it like off of your PC, or if you've got a newer television with a USB port. But from my experience, those ports don't supply enough power to that quad-core CPU, and games will lag and stutter, and they just won't look, sound, or act the way you want them to. So get yourself a wall wart to plug into, and you'll really thank yourself for that later on. So of course you're going to need a place to store everything. That includes the RetroPie operating system itself, as well as all of the games that you're going to put on there. Now for what we're doing in this video, I'm just going to use a 4 gig card here. Now keeping in mind that you will be storing all of your data on there, I would honestly recommend getting like a 16 gig card minimum. But we're just going to go with 4 gig just for demonstration purposes here. So you're also going to need a micro SD card reader, or just an SD card reader, depending on how you want to access your data. For what we're going to be doing here, I've just got this little USB stick style, but if you've got a more conventional card reader that does like SD and micro SD, that'll work as well, as long as you've got the micro SD to SD adapter. So that's all the core hardware that you'll need as far as getting everything set up. But if you want to actually play your games, you're going to need some type of controller. And luckily there are some options. I have used just an Xbox 360 controller in the past. If you've got a Microsoft certified USB receiver for that, it'll work flawlessly. The controllers are a little wonky for some reason, but it works. If you want to go with more of the old school retro feel, you can pick up a couple of these Super Nintendo style controllers off of Amazon. I actually got a 2-pack of them for like $12 or something. So you can also get these and have what I would call a more true, authentic experience for your retro gaming. So now that we've got all of our hardware sorted as far as what we need to actually make everything work at that level, next we need to talk about software. So of course you're going to need the RetroPie software, or operating system, I guess would be a better word for that. And you can actually get that at retropie.org.uk. I'll have a link to that in the description down below. You're also going to need some type of software to write that ISO file that you're going to download from RetroPie onto an SD card, or a micro SD card in this case, or a USB drive, or whatever the case may be. I'm a really big fan of Win32 Disk Imager, and I will have a link to that down below as well. Here we are on the RetroPie website here. It's pretty straightforward, kind of talks about the features and all of the stuff that you can do with it, which is great. But really all we're interested in right now is the download. So you got a couple options. You can click download up here, or you can click RetroPie here. Either one should take you to the same place. Scroll down a little bit and you'll find 2 red buttons, one for the Raspberry Pi 0 or 1, and then one for the Raspberry Pi 2 or 3. For this we're using a Raspberry Pi 3 Model B, so we're going to download the Raspberry Pi 3 version. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to downloading Win32 Disk Imager. So I'll have a direct link to this, but it's on SourceForge. Like I said, it's called Win32 Disk Imager. I've already got it downloaded, but if you want to download it, you can just click the green download button right there. So here we are in my downloads folder with all of the software that we're going to need. And you may notice that there is an additional folder in here called ROMs. Now, ROMs are going to be the actual games themselves, and if we open this up, you can see that I've got GBA, GBC, Mega Drive, N64, NDS, NES, and SNES. GBA is Game Boy Advance, and Game Boy Color, Mega Drive, which is a Sega system. We've got an N64, which is of course a Nintendo 64, the Nintendo DS, and Nintendo Entertainment System, the original, as well as the Super Entertainment System. You can find these online. I am not going to link to them. Make sure that you follow whatever laws are in your area for acquiring these games. The laws are different depending on where you are. So getting the ROMs is on you at this point. Like I said, we need first to install Win32 Disk Imager. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to click yes. I'm going to go ahead and accept. I'm going to click next, and I'm just going to go ahead and click through next all these. Luckily, Win32 is great because it doesn't install any garbage third-party stuff. So you don't have to worry about any of that. I don't want to read the readme.txt, but I do want to launch the program. So I'm going to go ahead and click finish. And here we're brought to a very, very simple interface. The first thing it's asking here is, do you have an image file? And the answer to that is yes, I do. I'm going to go into, oh, you know what? I lied. I need to go back. What we've got to do here, actually, because this is an archived file, we need to actually extract it first. And then once this extracts, I completely missed that step, and I apologize for that. We're going to get this this other file here that we can actually use. Okay, there we go. So now we come back to here, and then we can select our downloads folder, and then we've got our RetroPie version 4.3 for the Raspberry Pi 2 and 3. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then, of course, like I said before, we're going to need this micro SD card. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in here. And I'm going to go ahead and plug it into my keyboard with the USB port. And just instantly you can tell that it recognized that I've got a removable USB drive there. Just know that when you tell it to actually write this file to the USB, it's going to format the drive. So anything that's on there is going to get lost. Make sure you've got a backup or you don't care about what's on that drive. So we'll go ahead and click write, and then it's going to say, can corrupt the device, are you sure? Yep, I've never had it corrupt any of my devices. And then if you look down here at the bottom, you can see that it says it's going to take several minutes here, probably 5 or 6 minutes or so. The bigger your micro SD card is, the longer that's going to take, because it's going to format everything and then it's going to write everything that it needs to that drive. So again, if you've got like a 32 gig card, it's going to take much longer than a 4 gig card like we're using right now. Okay, so after multiple attempts of writing the RetroPie ISO to that 4 gig card and it failing, I went ahead and switched over to a 32 gig card. It wrote faster and overall it just worked better. So next steps are to actually take the card out, put it in the Raspberry Pi, and fire it up. So we're going to switch camera angles back to what I call live mode, and we'll just kind of go through that whole process of actually getting this thing up and running. Okay, so now that we've got everything written to our SD card, we can go ahead and take it out of our SD card reader here, or rather our micro SD card. So we'll go ahead and take that out, and we'll flip over to the bottom of the Raspberry Pi and make sure that we get this inserted correctly. And then we can go ahead and start plugging things in, like our Ethernet port, or our Ethernet cable, rather, into the Ethernet port. I didn't mention this earlier because it's not really necessary, but it is faster and more reliable for when you're transferring games over from your computer over the network, because you have to do it that way to use the Ethernet port versus the built-in Wi-Fi. So we'll just go ahead and plug that in. And then, of course, we're also going to need to plug in our controller. So we'll go ahead and plug that in as well. We'll need our HDMI so we can connect to our screen here. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in. And then we'll need to plug in our micro USB cables. So we'll plug that in right over here. And then we'll plug this in, and it should just kick on pretty much immediately. Like so. And if everything worked right, we should start seeing some lights flash here. That's a good sign. And here we are booting up. Sometimes the first boot might take a little longer than normal, but that's all there is to getting the hardware actually set up and ready to go. And so now I'm just going to press and hold a button here. It recognizes we're using a USB. So we're going to go through these different things here. We're going to say up, down, left, right, start, select, A, B, X, Y, left, right. And when we get to these, because we're using this controller, there's really nothing we can do here. So we just press and hold select for each one. It will skip it. And I actually, for the hotkey enable, I hit the select button because we want to be able to use that button to get out of our games once they're going. So we'll go ahead and click OK. I guess we'll click Start there. And we'll go down to Quit. And right now, this is the only option we've got because there are no games on here. So our next step will be to actually figure out what the IP address is of our RetroPie, and then go back to our computer to move the different files over so we can have games on here. So we'll go ahead and press A and to go into the configuration, and we'll go clear down to the bottom, and we're going to click on Show IP. And we'll give this just a second to run through. And here we can see that the IP address is 192.168.1.20. So on our computer, we're going to go back to our File Explorer, and we're going to open up that IP address. Okay, so here we are on my desktop. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to my computer. And I'm going to drag this up a little bit. And then up here in the address bar, I'm going to do / 192.168.1.20. And I'll hit enter. And here we've got BIOS, configs, ROMs, and splash screens. The only thing we really care about right now is ROMs, so we'll go ahead and open that. And here you can see all of the different systems that it will recognize by default. Now there's nothing in any of these, but it's already got all the folders built for you so that you can actually see where everything goes. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up that window. I'm going to go back to my PC. I'm going to go into my downloads because that's where I've got my ROMs. And I'm going to open that up. And then I'm just going to I'm going to highlight all of these and drag them over. And we'll give this a little while because it does have a few gigs, I think. Let's see here. 1.79 gigs of files. Now, if you look here, though, that's 1,100 games in less than 2 gigabytes. So that's really something to keep in mind here, is that like your old favorite Super Nintendo games were only 1 megabyte or 2 megabytes at most for all of those games that you really enjoyed playing back then. I guess, okay, I lied. There's a 4 megabyte, but that was Fatal Fury Special Edition. For the most part, most of these were just 1 to 2 megabytes pretty much consistently. So we'll go ahead and close that. And here we can open this up and see how fast things are going or not going, whatever the case is. And you can see that it's got a couple of minutes to go here. Okay, so that is all of the files transferred over from my computer to the Raspberry Pi that we've got sitting on my desk here. So let's go ahead and switch camera angles back and we'll complete the setup. Okay, so now that we have our files copied over from the computer to the Raspberry Pi, the next step is actually just unplugging and replugging the Raspberry Pi to reboot, and that way it can go through all those files that we just put on the Pi, and then it can index all of those, and then we're good to go. Now you can see we've actually got some different game systems here available to us, like the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Color, Mega Drive, N64, Nintendo, and Super Nintendo. And here you can see right below that, when you pause on each one, it tells you how many games are available for each one. And on the Super Nintendo alone, we've got more than 1,000. So let's go ahead and open that up by pressing the A button. And here everything is already indexed alphabetically, and pretty much you're good to go there. So let's go back to one of my favorite games. Oops. Super apart. Oops, pressed the wrong button. There we go. So now it's asking me to press a button to configure, and we're good to go. Now there's not going to be any audio here because there's actually no speakers on this little makeshift monitor that I made. This is actually made out of a computer monitor that I've switched over so that I can use it for these little projects. But I can just go in, just like so. I'm going to pick Toad like I always do. And again, there's no audio. There would be if you plugged this into your television or had speakers or whatever available. Again, I don't for this particular device, but you can see just that easily. Here I am playing old school Super Mario Kart on a Super Nintendo emulator on a Raspberry Pi. Okay guys, that's it. That's really all there is to setting up and configuring a Raspberry Pi to be a RetroPie, retro arcade simulator. So if you ever want to go back and play some of those old games you played as a kid, or maybe games that your parents played when they were kids or whatever, this is a really inexpensive way to do just that. So I'll have links to everything down in the description, including all of the hardware that I used and that sort of thing. So hopefully this was a fun project and you enjoyed it. If you did, do me a favor, give the video a thumbs up. Really helps me out a bunch. Also, if you like this kind of content, I've got more tech reviews and tutorials and stuff like this coming out, so be sure to subscribe so you can be notified when that kind of stuff does come out. Also, as per just about everybody else these days, I will have links in the description where you can help support the channel financially, whether it's through Patreon or my Amazon affiliate account or any of that kind of stuff. Again, all those links will be in the description. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video here. Thanks so much for your time. I always appreciate your support, and I'll talk to you in the next one.